Well, wonderful. Thank you for joining this afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. So welcome. I am Susan Proctor, and I am the director of the Alumni Relations Department here at Grand Valley State University. Once again, pleased to see so many of you joining us today for this, our fifth and last session of our five-part Retire Well series, The Hidden Costs of Aging. Before we get started today, I just wanted to acknowledge that we gather, so many of us, with heavy hearts and heavier hearts than we've had in the last few weeks here. The world has experienced some significant tragedies this last week. And I invite, excuse me, I invite you to join me in honoring and remembering the tens of thousands of individuals who have lost their lives, both due to the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, the ongoing conflicts and offensives in the Ukrainian war, and much more closer to home in the recent shooting at Michigan State just a few days ago. GVSU has a long-standing sisterhood with the university to our east. GVSU students who graduated from our first pioneer class, many of whom I know are joining us today, may recall that they were actually de facto graduates of MSU, as the institution had to grant our first degrees before we were accredited institutions. So we share their grief on so many levels. So I invite you to join me in a brief moment of silence to honor those whose lives have been lost this last week. Thank you so much. And now on to our programming for the week. So this Retire Well series is part of some new alumni relations programming, our Laker for a Lifetime learning programming, which is aimed at supporting our graduates through every stage of their life and career. In today's session, we will explore the hidden costs that come with aging. Today's session comes on the heels of other great programming that we have offered throughout the series. We've learned a little bit about Medicare, estate planning, investing, maximizing our time in retirement, Social Security in today's session as well. So if you were able to attend past webinars, you can, or if you were unable to attend those webinars, you can find videos and other resources from our prior presentations at www.gvsu.edu/alumni/retirewell. As with past sessions, today's session will be recorded, and we will send the video as well as the presentation resources to you in a follow-up email, and they will live here on this website for the future as well. In addition, you will get a survey and follow up to this, but we're going to ask you a little bit about how you found the programming in this session, as well as solicit some ideas for maybe future programming, or if any of you, like Melissa, have expertise that you want to share with the Laker community, we certainly welcome input on that. So to that end, I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to partner with Melissa, one of our amazing graduates and a member of our Alumni Association Board of Directors. Melissa Stewart is really the brainchild behind this Retire Well series. We so appreciate Melissa sharing her infinite wisdom, expertise, and her amazing connections, such as the ones she has with Quentin, who will be presenting today. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming 2009 Grand Valley graduate, Melissa Stewart, who is the founder and financial advisor at ClearVista Advisors. Melissa.
Hey, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Susan. Just one moment here while I get my screen up and running. So hopefully you can see that. Can you see that, Susan? Great. So my name is Melissa Jean Stewart, and I have now been in the financial services industry for about 20 years. And I first started out at Grand Valley State University, getting my double major in finance and business management. And then started locally at Lake Michigan Credit Union as a teller. And from there have grown to love finances, love helping people figure out their finances, and just really blessed to work in the West Michigan community and give back to the West Michigan community. So this series came out. We've been doing it now for ClearVista Advisors, who's been hosting it now, or I have been helping to host it now for about 10 years. And over that time, we've been able to partner with a lot of different professionals But it came about from a human resources director that I was working with saying, you know what, we have a lot of people who are getting ready for retirement. It would be really, really nice if we could just have some sort of course that they could take to help them understand the different decisions that they're going to have to make, from Social Security to Medicare to what they should be considering about when it comes to their investments. How are they going to replace their paycheck? But another large part of preparing for retirement is understanding the costs that are involved in aging. And honestly, for me, this presentation, I love this presentation. Quentin's amazing, but I think this is the topic that's always the hardest, because none of us really want to admit that we're going to age or that we're going to need different care down the road. But once you go through this presentation, I think it makes it easier to understand some of the costs involved, the decisions you'll have. And honestly, sometimes this is going to be for you, but a lot of times for this information, it's for my clients who are helping their parents work through this information and these decisions. So it will be applicable maybe to you down the road, but right now, a lot of us might be helping our parents out with these decisions. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Quentin. John is on the call with us today as well. And Quentin, they are from Franklin Templeton Investments. They are really what I call the advisors to the advisors, providing us with education and content to help better serve the community and clients. So we're just really, really thankful for our partnership with them. Quentin has been in the financial industry for over 20 years now, but really he works in providing presentations and training to others. And when I asked him, you know, what should I say about him today? He said, he helps people have better conversations. And I'll say that's true with the little time that I've had to share with Quentin, because he's in very high demand with his presentation capabilities. But he's also going to help you a lot to have better conversations when it comes down to this. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass the baton on over to you, Quentin.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Melissa. Thank you for having me, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Quentin Alston Spratt, Head of Advisor Practice Management with Franklin Templeton. Now, I'm a really transparent and truthful guy, so let me start by saying the title doesn't matter. Melissa nailed it. What matters to me most is I help people have better conversations. The question is why? Because it doesn't matter if it's in business or if it's out there in the world, better conversations lead to better relationships. And whether it's out there in the world or it's back here in business, better relationships lead to results. Now, I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to share with you the presentation that we have for today. Melissa, Susan, if you can give me a thumbs up that we have it, it'd be greatly appreciated. I have a thumbs up.
And I want to quick here, I forgot to mention that we want today's conversation to be interactive. And so on the Zoom meeting, at the bottom of your screen is a question and answer. I'll be asking questions along the way that I've gotten from a lot of my clients over the years, but we definitely get the most out of these presentations when the audience is interactive. So please feel free to put questions in the Q&A as we go through this presentation today, and I'll be moderating those. Sorry about that, Quentin.
No worries. Great catch. All part of the conversation. So as we talk about having better conversations, yes, we do want you to come in because this time is for you. Now, I'm going to direct you to the subtitle. Steer clear of the title for a second. The subtitle is the important conversations you need to have about care and housing expenses. But when I do this conversation, I change one word in the sentence. These are the important conversations we need to have about care and housing expenses, because what we're going to talk about impacts all of us. And it's the title of this conversation. It's the hidden cost of aging that's most likely to not just blindside us or your parents or your kids' future. It's typically what catches most of us off guard. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into this conversation, and I'm going to illustrate some things here for you. And I'm going to illustrate for you retirement in theory. Now, retirement in theory, you work for 20, 30, 40 years. And when you're done, they're going to give you a gold watch. You're going to sail off into the sunset. You're going to do all the things the credit card commercials told you can do. That's right. You can forget your luggage and you can buy more because you have American Express. It's okay if you remember that commercial from the late 90s. And then you're going to go do all these things. And when it's done, you're going to have this bucket of money to pass to everyone that you love. Now, let me go back in this story. I said you're going to work at one place for 20, 30, or 40 years. If you're a millennial like me, you probably worked at 20, 30, 40 places in the past year. But you get what I'm saying. At some point, you're going to want to retire. But retirement isn't necessarily a straight line. And there are some things that tend to get in the way. So this is a chance for us to, we could even use the Q&A box if you want. I'm sorry, Melissa, but I'm going to muddy up the box here for a second. What are some things that tend to get in the way of people retiring the way they want to retire? Feel free to throw it in the Q&A box. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you've experienced it. This is the safe zone, but we just want to add to that conversation. While we wait for some of those responses to come in, I'm going to illustrate a few things that tend to get in the way. Some things that get in the way, and I'm sure we're going to find them here as we see some of those results coming in. We see that retirement isn't necessarily a straight line. We see that, we have someone say that sickness, cancer, or the death of a spouse, or mental illnesses like Alzheimer's, all of these things are going to come up today. Thank you for that. Cost of living keeps rising. Schedules with spouses, inflation is the stock market, taking care of a friend. All of these things are huge. And you can see this here on the screen. Because to your point, when there is that health crisis, that leads to unexpected expenses. It might be the need for you to do in-home remodeling, or it might be the cost of care. Or to your point, heaven forbid these things happen when there's a market correction, kind of like what we're experiencing now. All of these things impact how much money is left to pass to someone else. I'm going to ask for you to take notes today because I'm going to share some things that are not in the script. And as you grab something to write with, I'm going to set up our next point of conversation here. I want to talk to you about 3 different groups. And there's a 4th group that's not listed here. And the reason why this is so important is because we have to change the narrative out there. There are people out there who say, don't worry, you know what, when you retire, life gets less expensive. You know, you don't have to go to work every day. It's cheaper. And the fact of the matter, it's highly unlikely. So there's 3 buckets that I want you to be very aware of. What I'm saying to you is, who is this conversation for? It's for these 4 groups. Number 1 is for individuals in their go-go years. This is the first 10 years in retirement, ages 65 to 75. And it could be a little bit younger or older, depending when you retire, but you get it. You're retired. You have more money than ever before. Remember the whole credit card thing? You're going to sail around the world. You're going to travel. All your friends are at work. And you have nothing but time and money. So you know what happens? Every day becomes Saturday. That's right. It's the most expensive day of the week. And our costs automatically go up. Let's go to the next group. That's the slow-go years. That's the next 10 years in retirement, 76 to 85, right? And we might slow down a bit. Maybe we're not traveling as much. Maybe we don't want the grandkids to spend as much time as we thought we want them to. We're willing to give them back. But at some point in time, our healthcare costs start to go up. And this is what makes the cost of living for us rise. Third group. This is 86 plus. This is the no-go years. This is where we start to slow down due to health. But because our health is slowing down, our healthcare costs start to go up, making this part of the most expensive years because we may have to pay for care as well. These are the 3 different groups that we have to consider as we go through time. There's a 4th group that I promised you, and it's not listed here. Melissa nailed this at the beginning. This is the group called the sandwich generation. That's 45 to 65. These are the individuals who are trying to plan for their own retirement. They're trying to plan for their lives while caring for their aging parents. Oh, by the way, trying to raise their children as well. These four groups will be severely impacted by the conversation we're going to have today. And if you're in that 45 to 65 bucket, or you know someone who is, I'm going to encourage you to share today's conversation with them to help them. And if you're in this bucket, I'm going to encourage you to pay close attention, because we're going to talk about three things today that will impact all of these buckets, but especially this group. And number one, we're going to talk about the profile of the aging landscape. We're going to then talk about care and housing considerations. This is where we'll spend the vast majority of our time. Lastly, we're going to talk about how do we formulate a plan that works. Now, before we formulate a plan that works, we first have to understand what's happening out there. So we'll start here. When we take a look at the aging landscape, actually, you know what? I'm going to do this differently than I normally do it. I'm going to play a game. And I'm going to ask you to use your Q&A features yet again. Okay, and we'll do this quickly. All right, we're going to play true or false. If you think it's true or false, put a T or F in the chat. So 21% of our population will be 65 plus by the year 2030. Put a T in the chat if you think that is true. Perfect. We have our first result in. We have true. We have some trues coming in. Okay, perfect. Perfect. I have a false. Thank you for standing confidently, right? So we have our results coming in. So thank you very much. Hold your results for a second. Next question. A 65-year-old can expect to live an additional 18 to 20 years on average once turning 65. If you think this is true, put a T or F in the chat. That'd be greatly appreciated. We're doing a quick knowledge test. We're seeing what we think. Okay, I have a bunch of trues here. Okay, I have a confident false. Thank you for your vote of confidence there. We're going to do this one more question here. 80% of older adults are living with at least one chronic disease or illness. Put a T or F in the chat. Okay, got some great results. Perfect. I have T's. I have a lot of T's, T or longer. I have a false in the chat. Perfect. Okay, so here's the thing. If you said true to all three of these, you would actually be correct. And we're going to unpack some of these things here. Now, let's take a look at what's really happening out there. When you look at the over 65 segment, many of you might remember this old adage that there's 10,000 people a day turning 65. Well, that number has changed over the years. It's really down to about 5,000. But quite frankly, that's still a significant amount of people turning 65 per day. And by the year 2030, it'll be over 20% of our population. And that's a lot of people with a very specific set of needs. Not just any needs, but what's really driving those needs is the fact that their life expectancy is increasing in this country. Once an individual hits 65, we already saw in the quiz, the green bar illustrates men, the blue bar illustrates women. A male can expect to live another 18 years once turning 65. Women can expect to live another 20. Once an individual turns 85, men can expect to live another 6 years. Women can expect to live another 7. What does this mean? This means we have to plan for our money to last longer. There's another thing that's noteworthy here. It doesn't matter which group you're looking at, whether it's 65 plus or 85 plus, women are 3 times more likely to outlive their counterparts. Now, I'm going to stop the car here for a second. I'm going to have this conversation 2 ways. Number one, what does this mean for us as individuals? It means that we have to prepare the women in our household to make sure that they can execute the plans that's needed to sustain their independence. I'm going to have this conversation the second way. I'm going to be honest. I go around the country and I work with financial professionals like Melissa. And what I am challenging them to do with you, I'm challenging them to pursue the women in the household with the same intensity they pursue the men. Because this is what's happening. And we have to make sure that our women out here are prepared to have the conversations they need to have in order to get the outcomes that they want. And this is why these conversations are needed. So please, we're going to encourage you to talk about what's important to you. Bring both parties to the table if that's the situation, and making sure we're having a full and robust conversation. Now, I'm going to push this conversation forward, and we need to talk about chronic illnesses. Chronic illnesses are the illnesses that, quite frankly, they don't go away. 80% of people out there are living with at least one, but you know what's interesting? Just as many people are living with two. And this matters because things that used to take us out, we're living with now. And it's impacting our life expectancy, but it's also impacting something else that no one ever asked. Everyone asks, how do you want to live? But no one ever asks, where do you want to live? So I think you should know this. When you take a look at where people go to age, the vast majority of people up to 65 or so, they live in traditional housing. What does that mean? They typically age in their homes. But as individuals get older, we see the landscape start to shift. You see that people go into community housing with services. We'll talk about this. That number more than doubles. People going to long-term care facilities. Somebody put Alzheimer's in the chat, right? That number almost quadruples as people get older. So we want to work, and I'm so glad to hear we have this program where we're talking about estate planning and show me the money and Medicare 101 and maximizing Social Security, because all these things are essential for paying for this type of care. Thank you, Melissa and Susan, for putting this together. So I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to set Melissa up here for some questions, but also I'm going to pose a question to you while we make this transition. We just shared some interesting statistics with you. We talked about the fact that the individual is living longer in this country. We talked about the fact that women are outliving men. We talked about the fact that people are not just living with one chronic illness or disease, but they're living with two. And we talked about where people go to age. Which stat stood out to you the most? Feel free to put it in the chat. And if you have any questions for Melissa or myself, we'll park the car and take any questions. While you put your response in the chat, I'm going to close this out here before I go to Melissa. Prior to coming in this space, my background was business succession planning, estate planning, and planning charitable giving. And succession and planning is estate planning for businesses. And we had a joke in the business, and don't mind our sense of humor. We're an interesting group, right? But it says something very similar to what's on the screen here. And our conversation amongst ourselves were, if you don't have a plan, don't worry. Your state has one for you. Might not like it. So the whole point of this conversation is to get some thoughts, some ideas at the table, so you can start to put your plan in place, one that will lead you toward the life you want to have happen versus the life you'll think you'll have happen. So I will pass it to Melissa. Melissa, any thoughts, any questions before we go to our care and housing segment?
No, we had one comment here saying that one attendee's 80-year-old mother is paying $13,000 a month for dementia care. And you know, chronic illness is one of the things. So I like that. You know, if you don't plan your schedule will be planned for you, you know, type deal. Same thing with this. If you don't make a plan for this, it will be made for you. But I think the nice thing in here, I'm sure you're going to come to this, is there's so many resources out there available. And you don't think a lot of people think that their financial advisor might be like a resource when they have questions like this. But really, we're having these conversations with our clients all the time. So we do have a plethora of resources at our fingertips to help navigate these conversations. And also just, you know, local or nationwide resources when people are, you know, trying to figure out what's the next best step. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I think you're so spot on. Yes, we're going to give you a ton of resources to support this conversation, and we're getting ready to walk through them. Thank you, by the way, to the attendee for sharing the story about your grandmother as well. I'm going to share some insight as well, too, as we go through this, some things to consider as we talk about care and housing considerations. Now, this is where you're going to need something to write with. I'm going to give you some notes. We're going to go through all 5 different places you can go to age. And I'm going to walk you through the pros and the cons to each. And that way, if it ever comes up in a family conversation, you know how to pivot, you know how to hear fact from fiction. So we're going to start with aging in place, and that's where most people desire to age. Melissa, you spoke about resources. As part of this program, we're going to give you some brochures and some guides to make this easy for you. Things like, if you want to age in your home, how do you assess if your home is right for you? And let me say this now about the resources. The very best person to use this with for the first time is you.
Mhm.
Walk through your home. Ask yourself the questions. And whether you're caring for yourself or you're caring for your parents or you're caring for a friend, like someone mentioned earlier, it will be immensely helpful.
Yeah,
Now,
to that point, when it comes to financial planning and aging in place, we say, okay, what's it going to take to age in place? And we put it in the financial plan. You want to stay there? Are we going to need zero entry showers? Are you going to
yes,
need new roof, new heating, new cooling? Are we going to need, do you have a house with stairs? And I'm sure you're going to go into a lot of that, but if people want to age in place, there's a cost to that too. And usually that's what most of us want to do. Think of hidden costs of aging, and I think a lot of people's mind goes straight to nursing home. But do you have the statistic on how many people like age in place?
I don't have the stat on how many age in place. I do know, to your point, it is the most desired. It is also quietly the most expensive. Okay. Or can be one of the most expensive. I was actually doing this talk in Florida last week, and someone raised their hand and said, well, I read an article that said it's not as expensive as you think. And I said, okay, well, allow us to use the next part of this conversation for you to judge. And I'll defer that to the audience. So Melissa, to your point, if you want to age in place and you're talking about the planning process, there are 6 things that you want to consider. Here's where you want to take notes. I'm going to give them to you now. And after we go through these 6 things, you can decide which one might or might not be more expensive. If someone wants to age in place, the very first thing they have to consider is the proximity of family. Proximity of family. How close is their family to them? Now, I live in Baltimore. Here in the Northeast, when people retire and they want to walk off to the sunset, you know where they go? They go to Florida. That's what they do. You know, I spend a lot of time in the Midwest. Not quite Michigan, but I hang out in Minnesota, Melissa. And people in the Midwest, when they retire, where do they go? Arizona. That's what they do. Now,
I mean,
Melissa,
we do Florida here. The snowbirds do Florida here. Okay.
they do Florida there too, right? Okay, so we'll take it. Now, what I haven't learned in all these years, Melissa, when people in Arizona want to retire, where do they go? No clue, right? I haven't figured that out yet, but you get it. No one wants to retire where they are. They want to go somewhere else. And what happens is most people move away from their support system. And then sometimes life happens. And now, because you moved away from your support system, you now have to buy care, which we'll talk about later. And I was doing this talk with a young lady last year, and she said, this was my father. And he moved to Florida, Melissa, to your point, had life happen, had a stroke, tried to buy care for some time, did not work, ended up having to sell out of Florida and move back up north in a not so great housing market. All of these things come at cost, and these are things you want to consider before you up and move to that vacation destination or that retirement destination. Second thing you need to consider, not to be confused with proximity of family, availability of family. Remember we talked about that sandwich generation earlier, and they're caring for the parents and they're caring for the kids, and there are a lot of assumptions made when it comes to family considerations. Let me step off the script for a second. Can I ask you to jot down key takeaway number 1 today? Write this in the margins, write it wherever you want. Key takeaway number 1, don't make assumptions. How do you know you're making assumptions? Typically, there's a dirty SH word there in the comment somewhere. There's a dirty SH word in your sentence. And listen, I'm from the South. I'm from Georgia originally. We don't use language like that. I'm talking about the word should. And I was having this talk in San Mateo, California, and there was a gentleman in the crowd. He said, Q, you know what? I've already talked to my daughter. My daughter's going to take care of me. She already said yes. And there's about 150 people in the audience. And I said, no worries. Can I ask you one question? He says, sure. And I walked up to him and I said, what exactly did she say yes to? And you could see his head start to implode inside. And his wife just burst into tears laughing because she's seen this look on his face before, right? And I said, hey, it's okay, come back. If you say or hear something that is vague, broad, or ambiguous, I'm going to encourage you to question it. And what's vague, broad, and ambiguous about that assumption is that my daughter is going to take care of me. She doesn't know what she's saying yes to, which takes me to key takeaway or point number 3. If you want to age in place. Aging in place is a family commitment. You have to have a very transparent conversation about what level of care is needed and the likelihood for the family to be able to maintain that care for an extended amount of time. Why this is so important is this keeps this from resentment from taking place. And we all have families. We've all seen it happen. And the absence of this conversation is what leads to that type of resentment. So we've got our top 3 if people want to age in place: proximity of family, availability of family, and then the family commitment to aging in place. The 4th thing, if someone wants to age in their home, or if you want to age in your home, activities of daily living. Now, I'm going to give these to you. This is the ability to clothe yourself, bathe yourself, feed yourself. Transference, that's getting up and down and moving in and out of vehicles. Toileting and continence, the ability to maintain your bowels, the ability to clothe yourself, feed yourself, bathe yourself. Transference, getting in and out of vehicles, up and down. Toileting and continence, maintaining your bowels. This can drastically impact your ability to age in your home. And true story, the reason why I'm so passionate about this, because I'm not immune to it. True story. One day I was driving home and I was going to surprise my mom. I live in Baltimore. She's still home in Georgia. And I call her. I'm about 2 hours away from her home. She doesn't know I'm coming. And I say, hey, how you doing? And we're talking and she's chit-chatting. And I really just want to make sure she's home, right? And then I said, well, you know what? Have a great day. I'll see you later. 2 hours later, I call her and I pull up in the driveway and I say, hey, what you doing today? Da, 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 da. She hears my call, pull up in the driveway. And she says, Quentin Spratt, is that you? And she hangs up the phone and she runs outside. Have you ever seen somebody so excited, like they're visibly shaking? And she calls me by my childhood nickname. Now listen, if I see any of you at a conference somewhere or somewhere around Michigan, and I hear you call me by my childhood nickname, she says, Pooh, what are you doing here? Now, I know you think it's funny that I'm 40 and my nickname is still Pooh, right? I know you think that's funny. But you know what's really funny? It's funny what you see when people don't know that you're coming. And what I saw was that my mom was struggling with 2 of her 6 daily functions. And because of our distance, I have a perpetual clock in my mind that every time I visit her, I say she has 5 years of independence, 5 years of independence. And after this trip, says she has 2. If you want to age in your home and you have challenges with some of these activities of daily living, because I'm not immune to it either, this is what Melissa talked about in the planning process. You might need to consider home modifications. And this might determine whether aging in place is for you or not. What does this mean? Well, what if we end up in a wheelchair? Do we need to widen all the doorways? What about the counter heights? Do we need to adjust the counter heights if we're in a wheelchair so we can operate the switches and appliances? And do we need to put a ramp on the house? And just because we can afford the ramp, does it physically make sense to do it every day? To your point, Melissa, the roof never goes at the best time. These are things that you want to consider if you want to age in place, or if you hear someone talking about it. Number 6, if someone wants to age in place, how can technology help? Well, maybe they can. Maybe you can put cameras in the home. So if someone's providing in-home care, you could check up on them. Or maybe you can use services like care.com to help find care, or Instacart to have groceries delivered, or Angie's List to find somebody to do the home maintenance thing that need to be done. Technology can assist in a lot of ways. So a quick reminder for your notes, there are 6 things to consider if someone wants to age in home: proximity of family, availability of family, the commitment to age in place from the family, the activities of daily living. You'll see these abbreviated as ADLs, home modifications, and then lastly, how can technology help? Now, we are not meant to do life alone. So we don't want to leave you to do it alone for you. We've given you some resources. We talked about that home safety assessment checklist. I encourage you to do this yourself before you take it to anybody else or you take it to your parents. Just do it yourself. Melissa, I've just shared a lot. I'm going to park the car and see if you have anything you want to add here.
No, I mean, it's good point. It's good content. I don't think we really realize how much thought goes into caring for family. So, I have aging parents. My parents are 75 years old. And I just know that I have a 10-year-old and 12-year-old. My sister, who is a physician's assistant, so she would have all the medical knowledge to be able to do that. She's also a Grand Valley grad, go Lakers. And she just had a kid 2 days ago, a new baby 2 days ago, and she has a 2-year-old. It's just, your children, I would love to be that person that could help take care of my aging parents. But the capacity to be able to do that with careers and children, and just the extra time that it could take, I would feel bad. I don't know that I could take care of them in the manner that they would need, and then
Yes.
I'm not being adequate. So I think just making that assumption that, well, my family will do it, or even my significant other, like our spouse, and then putting that on our spouse and how that can kind of deteriorate relationships sometimes. Someone said to me, do you really want your spouse to be the one to help get you in and out of the shower? Do you really want your spouse? How will that affect the emotional side of the relationship? So there's a lot of things that we have to think about if you do decide that you want to age in place. And then also, when will you know that you need to pull that trigger and it's time to go to the next level of care?
Yeah. We have a question just come in, but Melissa, so you brought up a good point, and the question came in and said, hey, well, what if you don't have any family to help? Maybe we're in that situation where we did move across the country and everyone's over here, or maybe that's just our situation. I'm going to pick that up now. Will the docs be available to download? I think Melissa, I'm going to defer to Melissa on how you want to handle the documents. Oh, you're on mute, Melissa. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. Always gets me. Answer that one live here real quick. The documents, I'm not sure. I have like 20 documents, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to link all of those to the follow-up email. I will see if we can, but if we can't, you're welcome to reach out to ClearVista, info@clearvistaadvisors.com. That's our email address, and we'll be happy to send these. So take note of any of these checklists or documents that are being shown, and then shoot us a little email, and we'll be sure to get them to you.
So perfect. I'm going to help in 2 ways with that. So number one of the documents, Melissa, is the workbook, and it's 68 pages. I know. Don't be alarmed. It's okay, but it's all the documents you're going to see here in one file that's easy to manage. So we'll get that out to the team. The original question: what happens if you don't have family? Or to your point, Melissa, what happens if you want to protect relationships? You don't want to put that stress on your spouse. You don't want to put those expectations on your kids. That's where healthcare options really matter. And you have different types of care that you can focus on. So let me walk through some of these really quickly. Your geriatric care manager is worth their weight in gold. Most of us made our money doing something other than healthcare. And your geriatric care manager will help coordinate care, help schedule appointments, all of those things that we take for granted to help you in this way. You also have social services that can help you find the right type of care after a hospital stay. But the 3 I'm going to focus on are home care services, companion care services, and adult daycare services. I'm going to talk about where they are different and then where they are similar. Home care services are for individuals who need medical and non-medical care. We had one in our home for my grandfather. Her name was Miss Irene. She was practically family. She was family because she made me salmon cakes on my birthday every year. So as far as I'm concerned, she was family. They were absolutely amazing. But she helped with things around the house as far as cooking, cleaning, all of those things. But she also helped my grandfather with physical therapy. Companion care services. This is non-medical care. These are for individuals who cannot be alone. They won't be providing medical services. You should know the difference between the two, especially if there's a dementia or Alzheimer's or a situation like that. The third type of service is adult daycare service. Most of us are really familiar with this, but this gives adults a place to go. So to your point, Melissa, kids and family, they can either go to work, they can maintain their lifestyle, or actually just take a break. Here's where the three are similar. None of us have been professionally trained mentally, physically, or emotionally to deal with the decline of the people we love. These services, while they are almost priceless, as I said, they're worth it. They allow you to experience the people you cared about for who they are, rather than seeing them as something that we don't want to see, i.e., feeling like, to your point, Melissa, like we'd be a burden. We just want to experience the people we love, and these care and these services allow you to do that. So to help you with this, in the workbook that we'll give, it's 68 pages. It's everything that I'm going to share with you in one document here today. If you need to interview a caregiver, if you need to find a home care agency, if you're evaluating adult daycare services, or you're trying to find the right geriatric care manager, we've given you many questions to ask to start the conversations. Because quite frankly, with the absence of these resources, it's kind of like the Wild Wild West out there. And we want to simplify it for you. Now, one quick thing. I mentioned home care services. All of these services are almost priceless. Why did I say almost? Because here are some of the prices. Now, home care services. On average, this can run roughly $50,000 per year. A home health aid service can run another $50,000 per year. If there needs to be an adult daycare service built in, that can run you another 20. Now, this is all varying where you live, and you can see that these numbers go back to 2018. So we talked about inflation earlier. What I would encourage you to do is take some of those workbooks, start calling around your areas and see what your numbers are. So we've talked about aging in place. Perfect. Before we go forward, Melissa, you have a request. Can someone type your ClearVista email in the Q&A or the chat, if that's possible?
Yep, I think Susan's taking care of that right now. So we'll be sure to get that in there. And then we'll get you the full guide as well. I do believe we'll be able to save the 68-page guide. So you should have access to all those resources in the follow-up email.
Perfect. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have roughly about 10 minutes. And I'm going to take us through the next 4 different places you're going to age. And I'm going to walk you through the pros and the cons of each. First up, you have your 55 plus communities. You have a continuing care retirement community. You have an assisted living facility and a skilled nursing facility. I'm going to go through these one at a time. First up, you have your 55 plus community. Here's what you need to know. These properties or these communities are great for people who are independent going in. What does that mean? It means that they do not need help with 2 of their 6 daily functions: clothing themselves, feeding themselves, bathing themselves, transference, toileting, and continence. You have to be independent going in. They're great for singles, they're great for couples. So someone said, well, what happens if I have no family? This could be a great option for you. Why do people like them? Well, I tell you what, there are medical services nearby. You have tons of social activities. You can engage with people in a similar lifestyle. What varies here? It's the cost. Depending on the quality of facility that you want, your costs can very much, they can vary. You have to know what's right for your area. Who is this not right for? Take a look at bullet point number 2. If you need on-site medical care, this is not the facility for you. 55 plus communities have care built around them. They have lifestyles built around them, but there's not care on site. If you need care on site, the rest of the facilities might be a better suit for you. So let's go to the most comprehensive level of care. And I'll say it again for your notes. A continuing care retirement community, or CCRC, is the most comprehensive level of care, not the highest. We'll talk about that.
Quentin, I'm going to interrupt you right there and just say that I think was bullet point number 4 on the previous slide, engaging with others, whether that's at a 55 plus independent living community or a continuing care community. We've seen that, socialization, and sometimes, especially if you're on your own, you might be a widow or widower, getting that social engagement is so important for quality of life, for happiness, right? I mean,
Yes.
for quality of life, really. Yeah.
Quality of life, longevity, you name it. It's a sense of community, a sense of belonging. So absolutely, you nailed it. Let's take a quick peek at a CCRC. Now, for a CCRC, you can be independent going in. You can be in an assisted living situation going in, which means you need help with 2 of those 6 daily functions. Or you can have a more advanced level of care, like where you need skilled nursing care. There's one type of individual this is not good for, but we'll get there. Okay. Now, as we take a look at this, you'll get all the same social features that Melissa just mentioned. And this is why people love these individuals. What is the downside of a CCRC? It's the price tag. Now, on the screen here, and I'm going to actually ask you all to chat here in a second. Okay. There's a buy-in cost. Or here you have entry fee, 100 to 500,000. And then there's a monthly cost on top of it, where someone said my grandmother pays $13,000 a month. So real life scenario, I was in San Mateo having this talk, and a woman came up to me. And that's San Mateo, California, for those of us who are not familiar. And she says she wants to buy into a facility. Here's what I want to ask you to use a Q&A. How much do you think the buy-in for her facility was in San Mateo, California? Feel free to jump in the game, Melissa. 1.2 million. From Kathy. 750,000. Come on in, Melissa. I see you thinking.
I don't know around Florida. I know what it is around West Michigan. So,
Okay.
I would say, 100 to 300,000, depending on the quality, the size of the community that you want to get into around here. But, you're buying into a condo, but then you only get like half of that money, that apartment or a condo, and then you only get maybe like half or 25% of that money back as part of your estate when you need out of it, right? Or you need
Absolutely.
to more advanced care.
The highest number I have here in the chat is 1.5 million. I have 250,000. I have 1 million. I have 200,000. Ladies and gentlemen, the buy-in in San Mateo, California for this particular property was $2.5 million.
This is out of our budget, Quentin. Okay, we got to move on. Okay,
right.
This is not
Okay.
the Dutch West Michigan budget. Okay.
Hear me out. Hear me out. We're going somewhere with this, right? The monthly cost was $10,000 on top of that. Leah says that's crazy. It is. I'm not in that budget, by the way, either. Just let's set the record straight. Okay. But how long do you think the wait list was? Put that in the Q&A. Melissa's saying at that price, you should just be able to walk right in, right?
But there, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a shortage right now of facilities. So that's one of the hardest things about getting into these communities. So a lot of people think, well, you know what, I'll just move into that when I need to, right? I'll stay in my house until I need to, not realizing that local ones around here have 1 to 3 year waits to get into them. So it's not like, oh, I need care now, I'll get into a community. We got to be thinking ahead on this.
That is absolutely correct. So as absurd as the buy-in might be, as high as the monthly cost might be, closest we have is an anonymous here, but you're correct. It was a 3 to 5.5 to 6 year wait. So to your point, I say that to say whether it's for you or whether it's for your parents, we have to start having these conversations early, because it can be very hard to plan for the life that we want if we don't. Thank you for that. So I'm going to push us forward here. There are two more types of facilities. Most of us are familiar with assisted living facilities. Yet again, these are great for individuals who need help with 2 of those 6 daily functions. I'm going to keep saying them: clothing yourself, feeding yourself, bathing yourself, transference, toileting, and continence. But they don't need skilled medical care. They don't need occupational therapists. But because they need help with those functions, you get support for things like making meals and housekeeping and transportation, and there's on-site medical care. And what's great about these facilities and the CCRC is you can stay there as your needs progress. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I think this number is off exponentially, but it depends on where you live. And so we're going to encourage you to use some of the workbooks that we'll provide to pick up the phone and call 2 or 3 just to see what you get for your money. The last type of facility. This is the highest level of care. This is for individuals who need on-site medical care. They need physical therapists, occupational therapists, doctors, nurses. Remember I said that CCRC wasn't good for one type of person? For individuals who have advanced cognitive needs, this is the facility for them. The CCRC is not for them. They have the highest level of medical on-site care, but what really matters here is safety. No one wants to get the call at night that the people we love wandered off. So what we encourage you to do is to use the workbook to see what the cost would be in your particular area so you can make the decision that's right for you. Now, as you make these decisions, we'd encourage you not to do it alone. It's very hard to formulate a plan without having someone that really help you identify your blind spots. This is why we encourage you to speak through someone who can help you. Someone like Melissa, who is trained in this space, who knows how to put things on your plate that you otherwise would not have considered, to help you determine what's best for you. Sometimes we need people to really help us get out of our own ways. So also we can be specific in what we're looking for. And not just what we're looking for, but what resources are available to us and what might be the best fit for us. Now, the big thing where the financial professional helps us the most, they help us get out of our own head. You see 2 types of people in estate planning. You see the individual who comes to the table with all of their things, like it, or they might not like it. They know they have to do it, and they say, hey, Melissa, here's my stuff, and we get to work. And then there's a second individual. And by the way, that first individual, that's my dad. The second individual is his wife, where she doesn't want to talk about it. Because the moment she talks about it, it becomes real. And whether she talks about it or not, life will come our way. The question is, what type of position will we put our families in? So what we're asking you to do as a result of this conversation, we're asking you to take action. We're asking you to write some of the things that are important to you down on paper and take them to somebody who you're willing to have that conversation with. We're asking you to go through some of these brochures, whether it's the current housing brochure or to assess the housing needs document. Or you know what, hey, Melissa, I did that home safety assessment thing and it kind of blew my mind. I didn't think about these things. Maybe we need to talk about what type of support I might need if I want to age in place, or case of point, what are my true housing options? Based on my familiar needs, based on my budget, based on those 6 things that we talked about. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, we're living longer, and this is great, but the costs associated with living longer are catching up. They impact where we want to go and how we age, but we're asking you to make a plan today. Now, I'm going to quote someone very near and dear to many of us. That's Mr. John F. Kennedy. And he said, the best time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. Now, I don't know where you are today, but for many of us, the sun is shining brighter today than it will ever shine. So we encourage you to take action today. With that being said, we'll open the floor for questions, but I'll pass it back to Melissa. My name is Quentin Alston Spratt. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your participation. And Melissa and Susan, thank you for having me. Melissa, floor is yours.
And that was a lot of so much great information. I just want to say real quick, I see one attendee did a raise a hand up during the presentation that we didn't get to. Doug, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Alumni Relations or to my team. We'd be happy to answer individual questions. Quentin, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise and time today. I think for us, it's about, I would really encourage people to lean on their financial advisor to help facilitate these conversations. I think that's where we can come into a lot of helping others, is by helping to facilitate these conversations between you and your significant other, but also give you ideas on how to facilitate these conversations with your family members as well. And then when it comes to creating a plan, so we talked about the cost, but we didn't talk about how are we going to cover those costs, right? That's also where the financial advisor can come into play, right? We work with your financial plan and we say, you know what, we need to leave a chunk of money that we're not going to touch unless it comes to a long-term care need. Or we're going to look at maybe getting some sort of long-term care insurance policy or something along those lines to help cover these expenses. What I think it's the statistics around about 60% of people need, or is it higher now? 65% of people? Don't quote me on that. Quentin, do you know the statistic?
Say that stat one more time.
How many people need long-term care at some point in time?
Ooh, that number is extraordinarily high, and I'm glad you're having this conversation. What's really important about long-term care is important to have the conversation now rather than later, because long-term care is increasingly harder to get. And so while the number of people needing it is high, it becomes challenging to get. So the sooner we start, the better.
So we just make a plan for it as part of your financial plan. So thank you, Quentin and John, for letting us borrow Quentin today. Again, partners at Franklin Templeton Investments, we just really, really appreciate the resources that you provide us so that we can help educate the community, and with partnership here at Grand Valley and the Alumni Relationships. So with that, Susan, I'll go ahead and pass it on over to you.
Great. I will ask one more question before we head off today. And a couple of people alluded to that. Quentin, you alluded to your mom being one of the people that doesn't want to talk about that. So I'm wondering if we could just leave this by saying, how do you approach starting to have that conversation with our loved ones, spouses, parents, what have you, friends, that maybe we can see need to have that conversation, but are reluctant to have that conversation?
Absolutely.
Any thoughts or tips?
2 words. And by the way, Kathy, Thomas, thank you for the comments. Leah, thank you as well. Patience and empathy. Here's why I say this. When we approach the people we care with something, when we see something, it seems blatant to us. It's not that they don't see it. They're dealing with their decline as well. And you might say, well, we'll take a little bite at a time, or we'll move a little bit at a time. And what might seem like a little for you could be a lot for them. So I'd encourage you to have patience and empathy. And it might start with a series of very small conversations to get them going. And one of the big things I say, well, can you just get all your documents together? That could be a lot. Versus the different questions might be, one of the things we might need to do is, well, we need to get all your documents together. How can I help? And we don't have to do this all over time, but how can we do this over the next? And break it down into much smaller steps so they can warm up to you. So I would encourage you to pace yourselves.
I always work with clients or anybody, family members, even friends, and I say, we just need to focus on the next best step, like one little chunk at a time, one little bite out of the cookie at a time. So.
And I would imagine it might be difficult, but they will end up after that conversation, as many difficult conversations are, better off and with a better peace of mind. So I thank you both for helping us to be better off, to have information, as someone just pointed out, that we didn't even know that we needed, to have a better peace of mind, and to have some really helpful resources as we continue to approach or enter or live through retirement, hopefully better educated, better informed, and better prepared. So I thank you all for joining. I thank you, Quentin and Melissa, for sharing your time and expertise. For all of those of you who've joined us, thank you so much for being with us these last 5 weeks. We will send some follow-up information, and we hope that you will engage in the conversation further and share with us what other information you would like for us to share with you, what other ways we can support you through networking, information, and things along those lines. So have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thank you.